Clay, I don't know if we've ever talked about this, but where were you on 9/11? Not to get too heavy right off the bat here with the season finale of Enterprise, but I guess it's kind of thematic and it's a good segue.
Oh, honestly, I don't remember. It's not one of those things that really stick out in your mind as where you were when it happened.
If you're not keeping a live journal or something, it's hard to remember exactly what day that was.
Yeah, no, I was in. Wow, yeah, 20 years this year.
Yeah. We're recording this obviously in early 2021.
Yeah, we could just hold it till September and really drag this season out.
Keep the Patreon open, but just don't release another Star Trek until the anniversary of September 11th.
I was in sociology class, I believe, sociology class in high school, and we had those. We had the TVs up in the corner that had they would go on for an hour or something at the beginning of the day.
Yeah.
And
did you have student run news on the TVs in the morning?
I don't think that we did. What was the thing that they played? Was it Channel 1? Did you guys?
We had we had student news, and then it was some sort of weird educational programming that was on as like filler for the rest of homeroom into the morning hour.
Yeah, I don't think we did student news. I could be misremembering, but we were in the middle of class, and the teacher in the next room came running in and said, "Turn on the TV. Someone just flew a plane into the Trade Center."
Mm-hmm.
And then we spent the next 3 periods watching TV. And that was
You got let out of school, I'm assuming?
No, we didn't. We didn't actually. I was kind of surprised by that. I do, oddly enough, I do remember thinking that we were clearly in the middle of a generational event.
Mm-hmm.
Which I don't know if it's always that clear when that stuff happens. I mean, some things are more clear than others, but that was one that I was just like, as I was watching, I was like, this is Pearl Harbor Mark II, basically.
There's a few events that stick in my mind about watching them on TV. Princess Diana, interestingly, her death was one. I remember where I was when that happened. That was big news. Columbine, 9/11.
Yeah.
And then Oklahoma City was a big one, too, that I remember seeing that, waking up to that news.
I don't actually remember much of Columbine, I think because at least what I was seeing, the coverage was not as succinctly packaged.
Yes. I remember a lot of kids video of the kids running out of the school. That's what I remember watching live.
So much information, as these things do with those types of things, was evolving as it was happening, that it wasn't totally clear exactly what was happening when, and you didn't really get a full recap of what was going on until after it was over and whatnot. But I mean, I think the most unique thing about 9/11 from that standpoint is it's the first one of those things that I can think of that everybody watched live as it happened. Those things don't generally get covered the way that got covered because of obviously what the kind of attack it was and the place it was and stuff like that. Usually it's you don't usually see the second plane. Let's put it that way. You know what I mean?
I guess I would debate. I would say Columbine felt that way for me because everyone was watching Columbine when it was happening.
That's a good point. Yeah,
it's less. There's less death, obviously. Whether there's still death, but it's not the visual impact that 9/11 had from watching it.
Yeah,
but it was something. I don't know what else there would have been in between those two. There was probably something, but I just can't remember.
It's not a catastrophic event. Well, not for America anyway. But I have vague memories of the Gulf War, seeing footage of that on TV, but that was not covered the same way, obviously, that 9/11 was.
Yeah, and it's not a moment event. It's not a moment in time type event.
Sorry, I was just saying, I don't remember. I mean, I remember being aware of Oklahoma City, but I don't think I could place that in a timeline.
It was the
like
morning. It was really early. It was 94, 95, probably. I remember I was sleeping over a friend's house and we woke up to it and his parents were watching the news thing. And that was one of those like, oh, there's been a bombing in Oklahoma and you're watching the news and then they show you the building and you're like, oh, Jesus. It's not just like some like purse on a sidewalk or something that had, let's stick a dynamite in it.
Right.
Yeah, I remember that. Princess Diana was strange.
It wasn't a bomb that went off in Tennessee that people stopped talking about after 2 days.
Right. Yeah, that
which was
remember
when that happened like a month ago?
It was like a street wiped out by that. But we just stopped. It wasn't Trump, so we can't talk about it. 9/11 for me, I had graduated high school. Obviously, it happened on September 11th. I was going to a drug test for a new job because I was going to take a year off after high school before college, and I was working for the electric company, so I had to go get drug tested for it. And I was very nervous because I had been smoking during that lead up to that drug test, and that's what I was thinking about. But I remember going in, so I was awake for it. A lot of people our generation were asleep, like kids were either in college and sleeping or they were in high school doing something else. And
so you got the call the drug test was canceled, and you were like, thank God.
Who do I have to thank for this wonderful news? No, I drove in and I got there, and people have to remember this was a radio still era. It was still radio. Like if you were in the car, you were listening to radio or whatever. I got in and I remember walking in and the nurse or like the office person was like very stone-faced and solemn, and she was blasting the radio, and I was the only person in there. And I was overhearing the radio, and it was talking about a plane hit the Trade Center. And I was remembering there was an incident right before that happened where there was a prop plane that flew into the Trade Center, and it was a suicide. So it was like a single seat flying plane had flown into one of the Trade Tower buildings, and it was a person killing themselves. And so I was listening to the radio thinking, oh, it's another plane like that hit the building. And then they started talking on the radio that the tower had fell. And I was so confused. I was like, how did a prop plane knock the tower down? Right. And it was just this slow thing of hearing all the information. And then you start seeing the footage and you realize it was actually passenger jets hitting the thing and everything. And it all came together. But I remember being very, very confused. Everyone in the office was very pissed off, and I still had to take the drug test. And it was this weird morning, and then driving back, listening to it on the radio. But that was my 9/11 thing. And then it was the rest of the day spent at home watching on the news everything that happened.
Yeah, I kind of remember there was a feeling of maybe this was an accident until the second one went in.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh, clearly no. No, this is not an accident.
Yeah.
Shit, I was going to say something else, but I forget what it was.
No, well, that we can go to The Expanse with that cheery memories. But it is thematic, and it is relevant to what this is, because we have to go back to the timeline of 9/11 to appreciate The Expanse for what it is, I think. So let's take a break. We'll play a clip from the episode. We'll come back, and we'll break it down.
I can't wait to get in there, Captain. Find the people who did this. And tell me we won't be tiptoeing around. None of that non-interference crap that Paul's always shoving down our throats. Maybe it's a good thing she's leaving.
We'll do what we have to, Trip. Whatever it takes.
So, The Expanse is the 26th and final episode of the second season of Star Trek Enterprise. It came out on May 21, 2003, so a year and a half after 9/11. It is the 8th of 13 Temporal Cold War arcs. It is the 3rd of 3 in the Archer's Trial by the Klingons arc, and it is 1 of 28 in the Xindi Crisis arc. So it's a lot of arcs.
This is it? They don't do the Klingon thing after this?
The Klingons are done.
Really?
Archer's Trial is done anyway. Yeah.
Oh. Well, you know, I guess they gave it the old college try.
You're expecting Duras to come back from the grave. Written by Rick Berman and Brandon Braga, directed by Alan Croker. In-universe date is April 24th, 2153. In this episode, after a devastating attack on Earth by an alien probe of unknown origin, Enterprise is recalled and sent into a strange expanse on a new, more vital mission. It's the Expanse. So, here we are, Clay, at the end of season 2. It's over. And now we're moving on to a new mission, as they say here. I think this one's kind of interesting, if not good. I don't think it's bad. I think that it's kind of interesting how it's basically a reboot of the pilot, where they even go back to the station and then reuse the footage from Broken Bow of the ship leaving the dock.
Oh, did they?
Yeah, that's the same footage as Broken Bow. So it has this kind of deja vu thing to it. Introduces this idea of an attack on Earth, very 9/11, has characters dealing with it, has the Klingon thing.
It also reminded me of Starship Troopers a little bit, to the beginning of Starship Troopers when Argentina gets wiped out by the bug attack.
Maybe that's a good place to start with this one, because this is not really important to anything, but it always strikes me as strange. This probe attack chose the strangest place to fire on, really, where it cuts across Florida, goes across the Caribbean into Venezuela, and it's a manned ship because there's a dead Xindi pilot in it at the end. I don't know why he was shooting for that area. That seems like a poorly conceived. That's like the Islamic 9/11 hijackers hitting like Wyoming. You know, it's like this is not the place where you
or Florida.
Florida, I suppose. Florida's even more crowded, but it's relative to like if they had cut the beam, across like Beijing or something. I feel like there's a lot of heavy hits in there, but they went for a lot of ocean. They hit a lot of ocean with their shot, which is maybe fortunate for the Earthlings, but it always strikes me as weird.
I assumed they were trying to do the literalization of that Bugs Bunny GIF where he's sawing Florida off and letting it float into the ocean.
Float off, yeah. Arizona Bay, as Bill Hicks would say.
Yeah, it's weird. It's a weird shot. It doesn't feel super planned. It seems like maybe he leaned on the wrong button in his probe or something.
Yeah, and the probe itself is a test. They tell us in this one, interestingly. So you show your hand. You don't want to aim for like the high value target with your test. You want to shoot for lower Florida, I guess. Why do they shoot Earth with the test anyway in the first place?
I don't know.
This kind of shows your hand, I think. We might be opening up some weaknesses in the Xindi operation at this point early, but it's one of those things that doesn't really matter.
You said across Earth's nose, not up it.
I know. Yeah, despite its face. What'd you think of this one?
I liked it. I thought the character scenes, the one-on-one character scenes, were fairly stock. I don't mean bad, because I think they were fine. They did what they had to do. I just think that they weren't doing much interesting stuff, except for kind of reestablishing motivations and stuff like that. But what I actually did like is I thought they did a pretty good job of tying their three plots together and kind of tying them together, if not tying them up, moving into this next section of the show. Because they had they've got this new thing going with the Xindi. They've got
the Cold War, Temporal Cold War.
The Temporal Cold War stuff, the Suliban stuff, the Klingon stuff. They even managed to get rid of the Vulcan spying on them stuff by having T'Pol essentially go rogue to some extent, stay on the ship. I thought they juggled that stuff pretty well, and I think it all worked together in a fairly satisfying way, and led it in. I think it's a good season finale, and it's a good lead into clearly the third season, which is going to be. I was a little surprised it wasn't more of a cliffhanger, but
pretty cliffhangery. There's no direct threat, but it's pretty cliffhangery, I guess.
Yeah, like I think the cliffhangery thing would be like it ends with the Xindi attacking Earth or something,
Sure.
Or it ends with Duras cornering them in the purple cloud or whatever.
Delphic Expanse.
The Delphic Expanse, which is my favorite all keyboard band from 1973.
It's very atmospheric.
Not
a lot. Not a lot happens.
Where they play one keyboard on each side.
It's the rocking keyboard, so they can.
Yeah. And the guy in the middle has a big laser sword that he waves. I thought it was a good season finale. They balanced that stuff pretty well. The character stuff was a little boring. It took me, oddly enough, it took me a surprisingly long time to make the 9/11 comparison.
Mm-hmm.
And the thing that made it click for me wasn't the massive destruction or anything like that. It was the scene where Archer, and I think it's the scene where Archer and Trip are drinking.
Yeah,
and
I actually like that scene. I know I know you were down on the 101. I like that scene quite a bit.
Yeah, and Trip is like, I just can't wait to get over there and start busting some heads for my dead sister. I'm like, this feels like every conversation I had about 9/11 on like 9/12. You know,
I think that's my favorite because to close off your arc story, I think the reason that this doesn't really work tremendously well as an episode for me is that I can see the strings pulling the plots together easily, and it feels like it's constructed just to close off a lot of stuff and to start something new. So it doesn't have a super organic feel as an episode. It feels like it was a construct made to reboot the series in some ways and to send them off into the Delphic Expanse.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
What I do like is I do like the character scenes, and mostly I like that Trip and Archer scene, just because it is very interesting to go back to something that was produced relatively soon after 9/11 and see. I think what we're going to enjoy most about the season 3 thing, besides any of the good episodes, is actually how much of a 9/11 commentary it was so soon after 9/11 and how things have changed. But Archer and Trip here are very angry about it and very ready to be totally different characters from what they are to this point, and it's a real turning point for them. I don't know if the attack on Earth actually has enough time on screen to really make all of that land. It feels very abrupt. Like, not that it's unbelievable, but it feels like the characters just kind of flip because they had this attack and now they're going to go off and do this thing. But it's something that I think that that scene with Trip and Archer really sticks out to me just because it's like, it is, as you were saying, like a very visceral scene that's a reminder of what was going on after 9/11, and it's strange to see it in a Star Trek show. However, I do think the series, even though we haven't gotten into anything, I do think that, like, I watched this episode and I was like, all right, it's good that Enterprise is going to do something different going on. Like, I feel like there's no way to make this a different season coming up, and it's going to have, well, we know it's going to be it's going to be serialized to some extent, but I was excited just to have the show change into something else. And I felt like this was a good enough spine as any to build a season around.
Yeah, I think it's nice when shows can recognize that something like that needs to change and shift towards that. Like, I've never seen a show course correct as well as the CW Legends of Tomorrow show. Yep. Which had one of the worst first seasons I've ever seen. And then they just figured out what they were doing wrong, completely changed the direction of the show for the second season, and it turned into arguably the best of those shows.
Yep.
And so I'm not going to go out on a limb and say, I mean, clearly the people who like Enterprise seem to think that's what happens with this as well.
Sure.
But yeah, it's interesting, and it's I appreciate when they take a chance like that and kind of retool things a little bit and repilot it a bit.
I mean, did you find it too jarring? Did you find it acceptable? It's a pretty drastic change. I know that it's tough to say with just one episode of what we saw because it's just the event and then it changes and the like the Klingons drop off. They get to the Expanse, but they don't really show anything. And what I think is kind of funny is that they travel for an extremely long time in this episode to get to the Expanse. It's like multiple months of traveling to get there. And
time. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Well, I think that a weakness of the episode in some ways is that time. I guess this episode in its original cut came in like 50 minutes too long, and they had to cut a lot of stuff out of it. It was all character talking stuff, but I feel like you don't really get a chance to get people's headspace in the 6 months or whatever that they're traveling to get from Earth to this expanse. And it feels like that's kind of important. It's just they leave Earth, and then there's a captain's voiceover that's like, well, after traveling for 8 weeks, we finally arrived at Warp 5. We've been traveling for 8 weeks. Like, we're way the fuck out here. And you don't get a good sense of everyone's headspace. And I feel that would have kind of been nice. You get a good sense of Trip's headspace just because it's important to the 9/11 stuff. But you don't get a sense of Hoshi, Mayweather, anybody on the crew, really, besides Archer and Trip.
Yeah. Trip basically turns into a country song from 2002.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think time is... It doesn't surprise me that a lot of stuff is cut from this because I think time in general is a little wobbly in this one. Because there's another scene, the scene with Trip and Reed walking wherever they're going. Reed makes a comment about like something for the past 3 weeks or 2 months we've been here. So it's like they're definitely playing fast and loose with how much time is passing and what they're showing you and stuff. So it is a little bit hard to exactly track where everybody is, how people are feeling, because you don't really see them. Like you said, Trip is really the only one who gets a spotlight. Trip and T'Pol and Archer, I mean, which makes sense because they're the big three there. But
yeah,
it's a little. I think the thing that makes it stand out as kind of contrived for me is once again they kind of hamstring themselves as far as what the mission of this ship is by having them very easily go back to Earth.
Yeah.
You know, like every time they do this, I think to myself, like, where are they? Like, how far have they gone out? Are they just, I think I said it in one of the previous episodes, they're still within earshot for when their mom yells and says it's time to come home for dinner. They're not exactly in the jungle or anything.
If they had never gone back, I would have liked the scene where they drop out of warp and they're like, it's our sun. And it just looks like another star in the distance. I thought that was kind of cool. But I know that they've gone back, so it undercuts everything because they haven't been really gone the way that you're talking about.
It's, I think what I would probably have done differently is I know that they have to go back because you got to retrofit or refit the Enterprise so it can shoot photon torpedoes. Or something.
Yeah, this is the first use of photon torpedoes. Yep.
Yeah, and they go back to the closest village and sleep. They hit the save and sleep button and they wake up with better shields and better.
Their party's MP is fully restored and their HP is off. Yeah.
But I think it feels so weird to send them all the way back to Earth because I keep thinking I was thinking to myself, what are they going to do? Like, what purpose are they going back to Earth for? Like, how are they going to help?
Right.
It's kind of unclear as to why they need to go back to Earth. I think you probably could have done it if you sent them to Vulcan and had them get like Vulcan retrofit tech or some shit like that to bump them up a little bit if you need to do that, because I think part of what is engaging about this idea is that Earth has been attacked, millions of people have been killed, and Enterprise can't go back. There's nothing they can do. So they're kind of impotent to help anything. They're just getting the news secondhand. And they end up in the position where it's like, okay, we're the only ship who can go out there and go after this thing.
Yep.
Like that, I find that to be more interesting and to have a bit more of an edge to it because it's kind of, I think it's kind of the vibe they were trying to go for at the end of season 2 of Discovery, where it's like, we have to jump this ship into the future. This is it. We're probably never coming back. So you have that sort of like Apocalypse Now kind of feeling to it, where it's like you're going down the river and you don't know what's going to happen.
Right. Yeah.
Whereas if they go back and then they talk to the admirals and shit, and then they have time to like stew, and then they fix the ship and stuff. I don't know. It seems a little bit, like I've said before, I don't like it when there's redundant travel in a lot of stories, and them going all the way back to Earth just to go all the way back out again feels a little redundant to me.
It does. It would have been nice to go to Vulcan. It's a kind of if Vulcan had souped up the Enterprise, the NX-01. It's a little bit of the goodwill that the Globe had shown towards America in post 9/11 days too, which is kind of representative of that. I understand they don't go there as it plays in the story here because T'Pol can't go back there is the main reason to avoid.
I think you can still do that story even if you go to Vulcan. Go to the moon of Vulcan. I don't know.
I guess they have to go. I mean, they have to go back to show you the smoldering wreckage of it in that really bizarre scene with the CG Trip and Reed are like waving their arms on the ground.
The smoldering wreckage of that wing commander level they're in.
It's not good, and it's not super effective, and it's kind of corny in some ways. But I guess they have to go back to look at it. Again, I don't think that the show has time for the characters to really feel anything. It's Trip's mourning his sister that we've never met before, and it's almost confusing in the episode about whether or not she was killed in the attack. He never really 100% clarifies that. And so, well, going back to Earth is too much travel, as you say. I in a sense that to go back to see the devastation that's happened, I think is necessary for the characters. It would be like your only exposure to 9/11 being just on TV, which I'm sure is a lot of people's experience. But like I think you're supposed to feel like a New Yorker in that sense, where the thing that you knew that was there is no longer there, and so it has.
And as I learned from the first Spider-Man movie, you mess with one of them, you mess with all of them.
I think that's what they were going for by having the Enterprise go back. But as you say, they boot them out there again to go do everything.
Yeah. I mean, I get it. I understand why they send it back, but it's just, I don't know. It's not my preference, but I get why they do it.
The other things that are going on here is the Klingon storyline, which you were surprised that ended, but it does end. Is there anything to this beyond just providing some sort of conflict on their journey, really? I feel like it's just wrapping a bow, and that's pretty much it.
Yeah, clearly not if this is the end of it. Yeah, there's not much left. If this is the end of the story, then yeah, the only reason they put it in there was so they could just get rid of it.
They have a weird scene with I would have cut the scene with the Klingon elders in the beginning who tell Duras to go get him. If Duras had just showed up, it would have been like, that's fine. I don't know why I need to see the Klingons telling him to go get this guy, but I would agree that that's all it is in that story.
What I think I would have liked from that is if they had a moment at the end there where you got to see the change in Archer's attitude a little bit more, because clearly they're a little bit more aggressive after what's happened and the job that they have to do.
Archer, you mean?
Yes, Archer, yes. It would have been interesting to have a moment, because I thought that they were going to do this, where they've disabled the Klingon ship, and then Archer basically makes the call to finish them off.
Yeah.
I think that would have been a good reason to use those characters and tie that thing up more than just to add in the gratuitous action you need to put in something like this.
Yeah, I was expecting it almost could have worked. I understand that they do that there to kill Duras off and everything, and I think that your version works. I was expecting a very angry view screen communication between Archer and Duras, where Archer's basically about how you fuck off, and then Duras would actually kind of respect the same that. Thing. Yeah.
Every time, like they're on their way back and they get the Suliban ships show up, and in the part when they're going back out and the Klingons show up, in my head I'm thinking like, give these guys a break, man. Yeah. Like, well, how come Archer? I was expecting Archer to be like, can you guys listen? We got bigger stuff to deal with here. Could you just give me a break?
It would fit in with his mindset at this point, right? Like he would just be like, I don't have time for this. And that's what you're saying about like he has a chance to let them survive, but he's like, I can't deal with any more hassles here, and just decides to finish them off. I was surprised he's even with all the delays, he's kind of slightly put off. He's like, oh, what is it this time? I can't believe this is happening. I would have liked to have seen that shift into an angrier Archer, although I'm concerned, and I think there's a general concern about whether or not Bakula can do Angry Archer, and whether Angry Archer is a character that people want to watch on this, because I find Trip pretty effective as angry. I don't know about Archer. You don't get a lot out of Archer here, except for that decent scene between the two of them. So we can talk about...
I did want to mention that, once again, it shows that the Archer has gone to the Riker school of how to kill somebody with a weapon, when he shoots the torpedoes at the lowest level first and then cranks it up for the next one, and then cranks it up for the third one to blow them up.
You gotta show the yield on these things. The better plot that's worked into it is the Temporal Cold War arc, which fits in nicely here with how the Xindi work and is a decent mystery setup where how, if the Xindi have been talking to somebody from the future, how did they get technology from the future at the same time? Because that's what Archer sort of figures out about them. This is the last appearance of mysterious humanoid figure, who I'm sure
really?
is one of your favorites. Yeah, this is his last appearance.
How? They never tell you who that is?
They never tell you who it is, no.
Seriously?
Yep.
Wow. I kind of respect that a little bit, actually, but it's I
was surprised. I did not realize that. I was looking at the memory alpha, and this is his final appearance. They mention him in the future, but he's never shown again.
They're like, oh yeah, by the way, that was Alex from accounting. No, I did find that scene to be really funny because they set this guy up to be this like big bad, and then all of a sudden it's like, hello Archer, thank you for coming in. We've this is the first time we've met in person, but we have things we need to talk about. So if you'd like to have some tea, you can hang out.
Yep.
It was just very much kind of cutting to the chase with stuff, but it was.
I thought it was sad because it's his last appearance. And I didn't realize that's at the time because I only learned that afterwards. But it was the first time I felt there was some sort of clarity to the point of view about what his point is, really.
Sure,
where it's not just this confused jumble of the Suliban are sometimes good and sometimes bad and we don't know. He has a more mysterious because he talks about other factions that are doing this and he's not particularly clear about what's going on. But he actually gives Archer direction as to what to do. And you don't know whether it's good or bad. You have to assume it's kind of the right thing to do at this point. But he wasn't, we were complaining about the Temporal Cold War before because it felt like the writers never really knew what they wanted to do with it. So all the episodes were just this jumble of like, now Archer's good, he's going to do this, and then this is going to do bad, and then Daniels is going to come in. This one felt like it was the first legitimate, I could understand why someone from the future would do this. Like the reason he was telling Archer made sense to me. The reason that he let the attack happen made sense to me. Archer's like, we wouldn't have believed him if he had told us this an hour before, so we let all those people die. The interfering with the Xindi and the future tech, and he wants to stop that from happening. That's consistent with everything. It's too bad at the end of his appearances is the only time that there's actually some sort of like storyline that I can understand going on with him and having like a motivation for that character that I can find believable.
Yeah, I agree. Let's play a game for a second.
Mm-hmm.
If this was his last appearance and you had to reveal who that guy was, who would you choose?
I like the fan theory that it's Archer. That's the only one that adds any depth to me. If it's somehow Archer from the future talking to himself, I don't know how you would retcon that to make it all make sense because it's so jumbled, but I don't think there's anyone else who I'd be interested in it being. Do you have someone on the top of your head?
Well, that's a good one because I actually thought they were going to go that way when Archer, when they were like, how do you know this guy's telling the truth? And he's like, trust me, I know he's telling the truth.
Mm-hmm. He showed me his heart tattoo on his ass, just like GoldenEye. Yep.
Yes. Yeah. instead of pulling out the tricorder to be able to figure out what reverse carbon date future things,
quantum dating,
whatever.
Quantum dating. Yep.
Quantum date the things from the future. Which I don't really know if I would call that like a slam dunk, but
is that the worst science? The guy's like, this always has a negative number.
No, it always has a positive number.
Positive number. It can't be negative.
But now it says -6. So or 420 actually.
That's the worst. I think that's some of the worst technobabble I've ever seen. For some reason that just strikes me as totally unbelievable that the negativeness of his integer is what upsets him. It's like that's a weird takeaway. Sorry.
Yeah, I was thinking Archer would be a good one. I think for maximum impact in story, Archer would be good. Even though, like retroactively,
hard
it doesn't
to
make a ton of sense. Very hard to explain.
I think Daniels could.
Well, I was gonna say, I think you could probably do it if you picked a character from another show and dropped him in there. Like, my first thought was like Data. But maybe it doesn't have to be someone that big, like someone who's a little bit on the outskirts of stuff, who would be just like an interesting character that you could drop in to reveal who this guy is and have everybody go, oh boy, what does that mean? Yeah. And then just kind of to satisfy that and then just like move on from it. Like
Data's dead at this point, right? Yes.
Data is dead at this point.
Not that prevents you from bringing him
back. He's never really dead, right, as we found out.
It would be someone like Dax. Dax is a possibility as someone
Dax
who could potentially be out there. Yeah.
Or Cisco. Why not? What the hell?
Because the Cisco.
Who gives a shit? Throw Cisco in there.
That's. I think you're giving CBS All Access an idea to do, and I don't want Cisco to come back. I think he's fine where he is.
Wes, that show would be so weird because he would only do it if he had some level of control.
Yeah.
That show would be bonkers.
It would be. Which maybe would be a good thing. I can't
what
disagree.
If it, oh man, this would make zero sense. What if it was the Tony Todd adult version of Jake?
He's frozen in time and he has to tell Archer, of all things. It's feeling, I think that all that you're telling me is that I'm glad they don't reveal who it is.
Yeah, it's probably I bet they had this exact same conversation and they were like, it's probably better if we just don't do it.
Just don't bring this up ever again. I mean, it's shocking he just never appears again, but I'm not going to walk away from this going like, oh, what happened to that guy?
I can't believe they don't round that out like in the series finale somehow.
No.
Like I don't remember much from the series finale. I know that I don't remember that being in there. And clearly
it's famous for
Go ahead.
Well, it's famous for there's a new showrunner, not Braga and Berman in season 4, and he's famous for just being like, I didn't want to touch that, so I never talked about it at all. Yeah. I'm surprised that they didn't do that at all. Yeah, that seems like something you at least give lip service to. It's a huge part of the show. It's for how unimportant it is. It's a huge part of the show to this point. It's the only. It's like the only continuing backbone that isn't like a tertiary world building thing. Like getting to know the Vulcans and stuff is not really a running plot line in this. It's just kind of something that you're exposed to from being in this timeline. But the Temporal Cold War was the thing that set up the series. It's like it was the whole, even though they never really touched on it because they never knew what they were doing. And here it is, just having Archer be sent off into the Expanse in a fairly satisfying way. And it could have been much worse. And I'm sure that I'll remember it in the future as better than it was just because it ended on a decent note.
What they should have done in the final episode, they should have revealed that it was actually Wesley Crusher playing a virtual reality game.
He's a traveler now. He could be traveling into the future because time and space, or whatever that guy says, his pedophile mentor takes him off under his wing. Anything else here? I did like we've had a Patreon episode about Event Horizon, and I was a bit surprised that the Vulcans basically go through hell. And then
they definitely go into the Event Horizon which
they basically say Liberate Tuteme as the video recording, which was
honestly, if they had pulled back and the shadowy guy had been Sam Neill from Event Horizon, I would have stood up and clapped. Professor Miller, Dr. Miller, whatever his name is.
Brandon, have you seen this cult classic from 1999?
Best movie. Well, it could have been. I think in a couple ways it could have been better.
Feels like it needed another pass. That would have been nice. I was and that video, I think that video is fairly effective. It is definitely a Star Trek version of what the Event Horizon sequences were. It's like it's a bunch of people just going like, "Wah!"
I mean, when I saw it, I was like, I don't know if they're killing each other or if this is just the Vulcans filming a video for the band live or something.
They do have like
that's a joke. That's a joke that most people don't get.
Which video is it? Lightning Crashes or is it I Alone?
When I think about live videos, I think of like a bunch of people kind of like running at each other and like without shirts and stuff.
That's I Alone. I just think of his rat tail, his hideously long rat tail,
slathering mud on each other.
The Vulcan thing, it's definitely a G-rated Event Horizon. I think the worst you see is like someone bites another guy's nose and there's like a hint of blood or something like that.
I think they were like tearing a dude apart or something.
They are.
Like they were all gathered around one guy, zombie style, tearing him open.
It ties into the Delphic Expanse, which is that there's no way this can live up to what they've been describing. I'm unfamiliar
The Delphic Expanse, from what I understand, is when you get your whole hand
passes through the portal. You know what I mean? Like they're like a Klingon ship went there and they turned inside out and they were still alive.
That was an interesting description when they were anatomically inverted, I think is what he says.
but they're alive made it sound like they flew the ship back.
From that Simpsons episode. Yeah, that's right.
Like they got home to tell people about the strange thing that happened to them. A lot of ships have been lost there. I think Soval has that Vulcan tape, and I think he says the Vulcans went crazy.
It could just mean like when Mel Brooks goes through the transporter and Spaceballs and his butt's on the front.
Right. Yeah.
Maybe it was just that. It wasn't too bad.
I just don't. There's no way this can live up to it, right? I'm unfamiliar with the Delphic Expanse episodes. I have not seen anything from this season. I don't think. I know what the Xindi are. That's about the extent of my knowledge here. But you know what I mean? Like they're promising insanity, and I don't think Star Trek, Enterprise Star Trek can deliver insanity as much as like this is it's a great setup for some really weird Star Trek stuff. I was expecting when they crossed the purple barrier, I thought that was going to be the end of the episode, and space looks totally different in the Delphic Expanse. Like when they get in, there's like no stars or something like that. It's just total blackness and strangeness because the Admiral or something says that in some places the laws of physics don't apply. So I don't know if they do this. I have no idea. Maybe I'm wrong and everyone's going to say the episodes in the Expanse are the craziest shit that you've ever seen. I don't believe that's possible from Star Trek, really.
Yeah. Based on what I've seen from this show, I'm not expecting it to get too crazy.
Yeah.
I'm expecting it to be not unlike the third season of Discovery, where you go in kind of thinking, wow, they've completely reset the table. Anything is possible. And then you get there and it's like, okay, it's kind of the same.
Yeah. They meet another vaguely militaristic militia group alien and get chased and put into a prison.
I did really like when they were, what the hell did he say? It's like, the Expanse is like 14 million miles wide or something like that, and they're like, how do you think you're ever going to find this? And Archer's like, the guy told us he wouldn't have come back if he didn't think we were going to get him. It's like, oh, okay, you're taking quite a chance there, bud.
My favorite size of the Expanse reference is when they see it for the first time, and they're like, how far are we? He's like, 100 billion kilometers, and Trip's like, wow, it looks like we're closer. And T'Pol goes, that's what happens when you look at something very large. It's like, are you guys scientists? Like, this is up there with the Forrest like negative thing on his readout, or non-negative, or whatever it was. It's like, this is an extremely unscientific group going into this.
I felt like they were speaking directly to me in all my criticisms of always showing the ships in the same shot,
same
where it
distance,
looks like they're 25 feet away from each other, which in reality would be multiple miles, I guess. But
these Klingons get right on each other's ass when they're firing the photon torpedoes. Everyone is just right next to each other. It was a pretty decent sequence, though, all things considered.
What was the impediment of the purple smoke area? Because they were like,
that's about it.
Was it just sensors? Because they were like,
they had to go slow, and their sensors don't work. I assume they have to go slow because they can't see what's in front of them.
Okay, because they were like the Vulcan ship. It took them 6 days to get through this or whatever.
That's true. And they're taking longer, right? They're surprised at how long it's taking. I don't think there's anything to that. I think it's just supposed to be a thing to get through.
Yeah, that's fine. I was just curious.
That's it. Any other thoughts before we go to final thoughts, read the patrons and stuff like that? We'll be doing a season wrap up, so we don't need to get into that or thoughts about it, but just anything Expanse related.
Well, we didn't really talk about T'Pol at all, but I don't really know how much there is to say, because her through line was the one that I thought was the most kind of stock character, where it's like, oh, you can't go anymore, but it's my life, Dad. Yeah. And then she's like, what if I just don't go home? You know, I was like, all right, fine.
It had been building to this, point in a way that, as much as any Enterprise storyline, builds on itself and makes you feel like T'Pol's humanization is kind of a thing. And I just didn't feel that there was ever a moment where she wasn't going to go home, and it wasn't tearing up Archer, really. When he's drinking with Trip, he's like, yeah, I got to get a new science officer. That sucks. Like, it's too bad. It's not like the episode is built around losing her or anything. There's a whole lot of stuff going on in this episode, and it feels like it's just one of those things that it happes and you don't say anything, which is too bad.
I wish what they had done, and I thought they were doing this, but I don't think this was the intention. Maybe if you felt this way, if you felt differently, let me know. I thought they were going to play it as though Archer knew she wasn't going to leave, because
I think I
Trip's
told my
like-
wife that was what was happening too. She came in
really?
halfway
Yeah.
and she's like, "What's happening? Why?" So I was like, "She's leaving," and she asked me, "Does Archer want her to go?" And I said, "No," because I thought that was what the build-up was going to be.
Yeah, because the scene with Trip's like, "Did you pick a new science officer?" And he's like, I don't know. And I honestly don't know who he would have picked, because nobody else seems to be able to do that job.
Yeah.
And then with the scene with the two of them, he doesn't really put up much of a fight around. She just kind of talks.
Yeah.
And then she's like, "I don't want to go," and he's like, "Oh yeah." All right.
I feel he puts up too much. I feel he should be more happy
That's
that
true.
she's not
Yeah.
going. I was surprised by the amount of, he's like, "Oh, you're going to betray the high command?" I was like, "The fuck do you care, Archer?" Like,
Well, I think for him to react that way, if you're specifically pushing back against T'Pol as a way to be like, "Oh, it looks like you have changed," no, like that kind of thing. But they didn't really do that. It was just him kind of being like, just kind of stating facts, and her being fairly like, there was no, I didn't feel like it was pressing either of the characters in an interesting direction. It was just kind of, we got to get her to say she's going to stay, and then him to do the thing where it's like, "We're not going to Vulcan."
it's a pretty limp decision. It's just, it's expected, and they don't ring anything. I think in general,
there's no consequences built into it either. Like, who cares
No.
if she doesn't go back? Big deal.
right.
Yep.
She's the only one on the ship, and it's just, you don't stop it. It's not like they're going to be in, they do drop that boy or whatever, but they're not going to be in communication, you'd assume, with Starfleet and the Vulcans for much longer. So it doesn't really matter.
It is kind of interesting how much of a parallel there kind of is between the end of season 2 of Discovery and this, isn't it? Because
There is, yeah.
they're heading off into this section of space that nobody else can go to, and they can't talk to anybody else. And there's kind of a promise of new races
new stuff.
and new races and civilizations, as they say in the opening or whatever.
Which is also Voyager, to be fair.
Sure,
We haven't covered it yet, but that is Voyager's thing.
And we never will, unless those zeros get a lot bigger.
I
guess it's the other number that needs to get bigger.
I don't think I have anything else to say about this one that aren't final thoughts related. Let's go to the Patreon stuff. And then
I just want to say, I at the end of the episode, I was writing, so it auto played the beginning of the next one.
Oh,
and
did you see the Zindi?
I don't know. I don't know who was which, but it was a really funny scene with a bunch of funny looking aliens.
Those are
talking
the
to each other
Zindi.
around a table.
Those are the Zindi.
Oh,
yeah.
really? Okay.
Yeah. The Zindi
So they're like a group of different.
There's like 5 different races that make them up. There's the insect guys. There's reptile guys. Yep. Yeah.
It was just when they cut to the CGI insect guy, I was like, oh, okay. This is what we're doing, I guess.
Yeah, I don't think that's not a spoiler, because obviously you see them in the next minute of the episode that comes up. But they are they're sort of Dominion-like. They're just a collection of alien species. So, let's take a break. We'll play.
Space is big, man. I don't know why they got to keep coming at Earth. Never works out for them.
Just leave it alone. Well, they were. What's the? We didn't really talk. I mean, it's part of the Cold War thing, but it ties into how well done I think the Cold War is within this episode. All things considered, is that the Zindi are attacking Earth because they were told in the future Earth will destroy you, so you have to get the jump on them.
Ooh, just like World War One.
Yeah.
Well, not really.
Just like the plot of Bloody Hell, I assume, right?
Oh, exactly. Yeah, I have to go back and rechange all the dialogue.
I can't have Bug Guy in this anymore. Yeah, I have to cut him out, turn him into something else. Let's take a break. We'll play a clip from the episode. We'll come back, read some Patron thoughts, and give our final thoughts about The Expanse.
Straight and steady, Mr. Mayweather. Let's see what's in there.
Thank you very much for listening today. Hope you enjoyed the content. If you enjoyed the content and you enjoy listening to all these podcasts and you want to listen to more and you say, I want to give back to you, Enterprise podcast, you can go to patreon.com/thepensky-file. It's the best way to support us. A couple dollars a month, you get extra stuff like extra podcasts. You get the ability to vote on things. We just covered we covered GoldenEye and From Russia with Love. We did Invasion of the Body Snatchers. There's a whole bunch of movies. There's like 90 podcasts at this point on the Patreon feed. Patreon.com.
Friday the 13th series. We've done the first two of those.
Yep. So we got a year full of Friday the 13th. If that's your favorite franchise, you can check that out. One every month.
If you want to be our shadowy noob Sabot guy from the future, giving us directions as to what we cover next, join the Patreon.
Obviously, Clay's been watching the Mortal Kombat trailer on
I am
repeat.
so excited. I'm so excited. Sub-Zero makes an ice knife out of Scorpion's blood and then stabs him with it.
Yep. Which is a kind of a reference to something we made a joke about in Invasion of the Body Snatchers, too, interestingly. So it all comes together. The microscopic needle that killed the guy, that's the police chief.
Right.
We were saying it's an ice knife because no one will find the murder weapon.
And if you want to understand that joke better,
and why it works in the body, in the context of the body.
You, like I, should go to Patreon and listen to that episode.
Patreon.com/thefensky-file. Thank you very much for supporting us, guys. I hope you enjoyed season 2 of Enterprise. We'll be back with our season wrap-up. We'll probably do it as a live stream, I think, because that's a good way to get the questions in, and it worked well last time. So I'll give you a time and a date. Follow me on social media. All that stuff's down below.
And then I'll change that date at the last minute and the location because I know how these things.
It's difficult to schedule. The Google Calendar is just filled. Let's go to Patron Thoughts. Or actually, we'll give a special thank you. The final special thank you to our captains of the second season of Enterprise. Thank you to Ben Douglas, Tarek Latif, Joint Mango, Kyle Barrett, Mike Burnett, Michael Pond, Matthew Ross, Andrew Cholog, Cardinal Doomsday, Nathan Alex, Samuel Custer, Matt Cutler, Nick Sergey, Grim Santos, Sean, Christian Pouch, Bradley Killens, Dwayne Hackett, Darth Moss, Kevin Reyes, Jordan Cooper, Walter Jane Hero, Russell Elledge, Vern Bendler, HH28, Stefan Minton, Derek Zajac, Paul Roscoe, Jacob123, Poindexter G, Nick the Rat, Mike Harris, Garoppolo John Zorn, Eric Santuan, Kevin Lowry, Captain Brazen, Jakey's Gamer, Patrick Seba, Corey Martin, William Scheisler, Swayland Blue, Zane Majors, Dave Davies, Retail, Olivier Pardue, Worf's, Tiny Brown Dix, Tom Hickey, and Jose Hunters, EW and F remixes. I think I got it that time. Thank you very much, patrons, for your support. Let's go to Patron Thoughts. Patrons can leave their thoughts about upcoming episodes when we read them. The new post is on Patreon for Season 3, the first half of Season 3. So if you want to leave your thoughts about those episodes, you can go to Patreon and do that. Matt Ross says, The Expanse, I'm told this is their 9/11 episode, but I see it more as an attempt to inject anything that was more interesting than what they were doing. The issues of canon be damned, again, as the only other time this is hinted at is in Star Trek Beyond, and it makes you wonder if they were just trying to avoid cancellation. Where was Earth's defenses when the sphere appeared? From this point on, we'll have Angry Archer, vengeance-seeking trip, and a crew set to visit a dangerous, weird part of space that the entire third season concentrates on. The Event Horizon import at the end was at least creepily well done, and I think the best, most disturbing part of the episode, 357 lovers out of 5.
Nice. Yeah, where was the NX-02 or that other guy's ship?
When the other captain that shot off the Klingons?
When the sphere showed up the first time.
Yeah, I was a little unclear about that. I assume those are just the ships that don't have the Enterprise engine, right? They're just the slower ships.
Oh, I guess.
I think. Yeah. That must be what they are. I was surprised they put up such a fight against the Klingons, quite frankly, because they did nothing against the sphere. So
right, yeah. You mentioned season 3 being an interesting commentary on 9/11, so close to it happening, and I'll be interested to see that because one of the things that really interested me when I reread it not too long ago, I've probably brought this up before, is the Marvel Comics series, The Ultimates, which is the rebooted version of the Avengers from the early 2000s. And it reads a whole lot different now than it did at the time. Because at the time, in the wake of September 11th, I think there was a lot more gung-ho-ness built into what I thought I was reading. But if you go and you read it now, it is like a searing indictment of America and its foreign policy and stuff. Sure. And it's I can't believe that they managed to put that out and not get burned at the stake for it. Or like I don't know if anybody noticed it was happening.
Right. Yeah.
But it was written by Mark Millar, who's Scottish, so he's like clearly seeing things from outside the United States. And what reads at the time as Captain America being a badass reads now as Captain America being a really ignorant asshole.
Yeah.
So it's a series that definitely has is worth a revisit this far out, I think.
The censors were more interested in destroying Drowning Pool's budding career because they had let the bodies hit the floor, and then that was just one of the songs like you can't play this song ever again on the radio. That was the end of Drowning Pool right there.
Well, then it got moved exclusively to movie trailers.
Right. Yeah. What were you expecting it? It was a radio era. Real. I was still driving around listening to the radio at that point.
Yeah. I mean, I think I listened to after 9/11. I think I listened to more Howard Stern and Opie and Anthony than I ever had in my entire life.
Yeah.
Because they were talking about it in a way that other places weren't.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, you want to get your commentary on global catastrophes the same place you get people talking about boobs, I guess.
Yeah. I guess we kind of talked on this, and we're too early to talk about, but no, we'll wait for that. I was just talking about Matt's point about it's an attempt to inject something into this that's more interesting than what they've been doing. I commented on like I did feel relief to not have another season. I know it's going to be the same. Like there's somehow this is different in my brain that it's not another second season hitting us.
Yeah,
because
it's focus. I think
it's focus. Yeah. Like there's no way that they, and I know they don't. There's no way that they can avoid what they've done here. It's not just the ignore the season that we want to do on Earth and just have all these missions in space type stuff. It feels like it has to be different. So I am excited for that. Interested in seeing the difference.
I do hope that there is commentary on their actions built into it, because I don't like the idea of Enterprise being sent on a revenge mission.
Yes.
You know?
Yeah. They do introduce a group called the Makos or the Makos or something. The Soldiers eventually populate the Enterprise. And
okay.
It's a tie-in to Beyond because Balthazar, is that the guy's name? He's one of those soldiers.
Cool.
Yeah. Jakey's Gamer says, The Expanse, this episode begins what I think is the most interesting arc of all of Star Trek. Yes, it's a 9/11 allegory, but it's ripe with potential to comment on both the good and the bad outcomes of its aftermath. It's also a story well suited to Enterprise as a free Federation. Humanity works well as a stand-in for 2003 USA. We've seen in this episode what they feel now, but what will they learn along the way, and how might this change? The Expanse kicks off some good character work, finally, and although the season certainly had its ups, and although the season to come certainly has its ups and downs, I'm looking forward to taking the ride again after many years to see how it holds up.
What does it say about this franchise that the answer to how do we do something interesting with Star Trek always seems to be put them in a war?
It's the exact opposite of what the setup is, I guess. You know, it's like if you're a place of peace, the thing that's your opposite is just war at that point. And it's whether or not it works, we'll see for this show. Worked for DS9. You know, it's possible.
I think DS9 is its own special case though, because it's clearly not as. It's got more stuff going on that makes that stuff a little bit more interesting. The grayness of that a little bit more interesting.
Yeah, and just the stationariness of like the character. You can't. It's not zipping around and all that stuff. Obviously, it's also. I mean, if you have to think about it in context, not just how we've been doing it on the podcast, but these were coming out relatively close to DS9 ending. It's not like we're decades later and it's time for another Star Trek show. So, I think my main problem with the war stuff is that they did so much of it over a relatively short period of time. I feel they could have expanded. Although Discovery is also back at everything's a war too. So
yeah.
Point XG says, this is mainly a setup episode and it's a bit difficult to really analyze it. A probe showing up and shooting at Earth like a crazy belter hurling stealth rocks is a pretty good cold open, and that's my one mandatory The Expanse reference. Sending your prototype for a test at the actual destination of your final weapon is really mind-bogglingly idiotic. The Duras plotline seems to be there just to give this episode some kind of story. The visual effects at the battle on the end and The Expanse are really quite stunning. Thank you very much.
It's like, It's like if the Japanese had sent one plane to Pearl Harbor like 2 days before the actual event.
Drop a test bomb. Yeah, I know. It doesn't make a lot of sense, and I also don't know why there's a pilot in it. A probe to me implies it's just an automated thing that flies out there and does it.
It is pretty random and weird. Yeah,
yeah, and they show the body as if it's supposed to mean something to you, but it's just a burnt humanoid. it's not like the reveal of that is like, what the hell is this thing that's coming for us? It's like, it's just a guy.
Yeah.
Royo says, 9/11 finally catches up to Star Trek. Unfortunately, Rick Berman and Brandon Braga were not up to the challenge, as 9/11 was a terrorist attack meant to cause terror and chaos. The upcoming Xindi arc, however, gets off to a terrible start in hindsight, as the Xindi's ultimate goal is not terrorism, but total annihilation. The last place you'd want to test a prototype to destroy Earth would be Earth, because now Starfleet is alerted to the Xindi and their machinations, and thus capable of immediate retaliation. The Xindi arc was founded on extreme contrivance and stupidity, attacking Earth before they were ready to attack Earth. Unlike JJ's Into Darkness, though, the massive loss of life is acknowledged, contemplated, and reflected on by the characters. A 3 out of 5. Yeah, I think I slightly disagree with their goal being different. It's just a sense of scale, because if we're on Earth, the Al-Qaeda attack on Earth is just a smaller scale version of a alien spaceship attacking us, and Al-Qaeda is into the annihilation of Western culture. So it tracks to me. I find it an acceptable change.
Yeah, I think the end goal is the same, which is
the other side goes away.
The other side goes off guns blazing into a situation they don't really know much about.
Yeah, I guess that's one difference, is that Al-Qaeda, and this is all hindsight, I suppose, though, you learn up in the years since 9/11, but Al-Qaeda was interested in the ramifications of what they did. So they were interested in sort of like military expansion from the U.S., and they didn't predict the Patriot Act and stuff like that, but that kind of plays into their hands. The Xindi, to this point, don't have a reason. That's the problem with the probe going and shooting Earth. It's like, well, you don't have a reason to cause Earth to want to do this at this point, so it's strange that you did it.
If they wanted to really do a 1-to-1, they should have had the Xindi attack, and then Starfleet go, well, we figured out that the Xindi are the ones who attacked Earth, so I think we should go invade invade the Klingons and take over Kronos.
Iraq was 03, right? Maybe it was later. Maybe they hadn't had Iraq at this point. Kyle Barrett, I'm sorry for my shitty history. Kyle Barrett says, The Expanse,
we lived it. We don't have to remember it.
No, it's just, it's like albums. I don't need the exact year. I just remember when it came out around. Kyle Barrett says, I feel I have a pretty out there reading of this episode. Prepare yourself. It's subtle, very subtle, in fact. Maybe so much so that it's only me picking up on this because I'm a genius. But I believe, and granted, this might be me reading far too much into things, but if you look very closely, I think it's there, that this episode, bear with me, is about 9/11. For a 42-minute episode, it's doing an awful lot of work closing out the arcs of Season 2 while setting up Season 3, not just in terms of plot, but the different tone and mindset too. My only complaint is that we did not need 3 battles with the Klingons in one episode. I know people complain about why the Xindi would alert humanity's presence to the coming attacks by testing their weapon on Earth, but the humans ultimately gain no important information from the test that would lead them to the Xindi, their location, or motive. That all comes from Future Guy. I give it a 9 out of 11.
Kyle, I don't appreciate your glibness, but it does show that you remember it, which is the important thing.
It's true that the Xindi, that this is all dependent on Future Guy telling Archer everything, because I was going to say, well, Kyle's wrong here. They head off to the Expanse, but that he's closes it out. I was thinking that before he obviously closed it out with Future Guy told them to go look for them there. So yeah. Yeah, thank you.
If they really wanted to set everything on fire, they should have revealed Future Guy to be George Bush.
He's got a cowboy hat.
Dick Cheney. Yeah.
But those are the better days. Those are the good old GOP days. Nick the Rat says, we just had CPAC today, and it's a fucking clown car.
Boy.
Yeah. Nick the Rat says, things are starting to get good. The Vulcans continue to be liars, and Trip brings raw emotion. He does. They continue. I appreciate, although it makes no sense, I appreciate maybe the show does this, but I don't understand why they're doing this to the Vulcans. The fact that the Vulcans just continue to not believe that time travel is possible. Yeah, there's no way that you're going to convince them that this is anything that's nearly possible, ever going to happen. And we didn't talk about that scene where the Vulcan doctor imposter comes in. He's like, you're not a neurologist, you're a psychiatrist. I loved that scene while it was happening, And then when the reveal came, I was like, that is fucking stupid. Like, this is the stupidest
it's a weird scene.
I like the interplay between Archer and him, though, for what it was. I thought he was going to be some kind of, I'm bringing this up now. I thought he was going to be some kind of sympathetic to time travel Vulcan who was like, I've been researching time travel. Take me with you because I know all this shit. But he's not. He's there to spy on Archer and get him to say something crazy, I guess.
Mm-hmm. Look at these 2 watches. One of them has a different time on it because it's from the future.
Scan it with your little scanning device. Tell me how many numbers pop up on it. Thank you, Nick. Latte Librarian says, wouldn't a giant slice into Florida fill with water immediately? Does the quantum data thing mean the future guys from 420 years in the future? Klingons seem superfluous in this episode since they didn't manage to do anything important. We all knew T'Pol was going to stay on board, but I didn't feel like her choice was justified in the episode, especially since you might get turned into a Vulcan zombie like those things in the video. 3 scary space clouds out of 5.
Mm-hmm.
And then...
What if the space cloud was actually Galactus from the second Fantastic Four? Did you ever see that movie?
I did not, no.
The Silver Surfer one where they're like, Galactus is coming, and then it's like a cloud.
Yes, that's right. But though they did that for didn't Green Lantern do the same thing? It was a cloud.
Green Lantern. Yeah, the bad guy in Green Lantern. No, it was a creature called Parallax.
That's right, Parallax, the fear. The yellow fear or whatever, right?
Which was it's I know this sounds crazy, but it's difficult to illustrate fear.
Yes,
as a visual concept.
Although
it's like Kirk Van Houten trying to draw dignity in charades or Pictionary.
Yeah, Galactus not an easy. I mean, Galactus has a representation as a giant dude, but also a fairly hard villain to portray in film.
The thing is that was back in the days where they were still gun shy about just going all in on the comic stuff. I can't wait to see. Galactus is coming. Yeah. In the MCU version of Fantastic Four, he is on his way, and I cannot wait.
Although I guess it's Galactus's thing that he looks like whatever you can conceive him to be. So
yeah,
you can have fun. Like he looks like whatever you would expect. He looks human because they're humans.
I wish at one point they had done like a Ghostbusters thing, and then someone turns to Reed Richards and go, "What the hell is that? What you thought of?" It just popped in there.
And he has a He has a funny ass name when he was a guy. What the hell was his name? His name was. Oh, Galan. It's not nearly as funny, but it's just he was just a guy named Galan, I guess.
He was a guy named Galan. He didn't think Galactus was Galan was cool enough.
No,
when he got to college, he told everyone his name was Galactus.
He added a cactus to the end of his name, and they're like, "Wow, man, you're fucking sweet as shit." Jose Hunter's EWNF Remixes says, I'm glad they created the concept of quantum dating instead of trying to convince us that radioactive decay dating, like carbon-14, could possibly identify an item from the future. Malcolm is bitchy. The best episode of Enterprise yet, a solid 4 veiny purple Betazoid vegetables out of 5.
Were you a little surprised that Reed was not more excited to get photon torpedoes?
No time, really, right? Like, he should have been more excited. It's almost so unexcited that you don't realize what they are when they're firing them off. Yeah.
Yeah.
Too much to go on.
When they played that scene, it was like they were both like photon torpedoes. What's next? Laser cannons, like one of those things. Otherwise, I was thinking Reed should be like, man, I don't like why we're getting these, but I am psyched that we have new bombs to blow up.
Well, here's a question for you. These photon torpedoes were held by the race in Cogenitor. That episode. Did Archer send back the Cogenitor for some photon weapon tech?
Looks like he might have.
He might have double-crossed that Cogenitor and made off with a missile that blew up his enemies on the Klingon
Making
ship.
the hard decisions, man. Sometimes you got to sell guns to the Contras, I guess.
I will say one thing about Enterprise. I do appreciate that they don't really. The show does have flaws. They do not belabor introducing tech. Like when they introduced the holodeck, it was the focus of the episode, but it wasn't Archer constantly going like, what do we call this? Let's call it a holodeck or something like that. And here, photon torpedoes are here. Reed, but as we were saying, Reed barely acknowledges that it came along, It's
not like that episode of Community where the dean gets the VR system,
right.
and he's looking at this rudimentary 3D way to file your
to file
documents,
files in.
and he's like, Jesus wept. Oh, what a good show.
That's what it would be. Thank you, patrons, for leaving your thoughts about that one. That's The Expanse. We're done with Season 2. Thank you for listening to all of our coverage of Season 2. It feels like it's been 10 years, but it's only been about 6 months. But we're done with Enterprise Season 2 into Season 3. We'll be doing a wrap-up in a couple days. I'll keep you posted. Follow us on social media. Patreon.com/ThePensky File if you want to support the show as we move into Season 3. If you've been waiting for a reason, Season 3 is the reason, I think. Clay, what are you going to give this one? To wrap up your final episode of Season 2 of Enterprise, on our scale of 1 to 5, what are you going to give this one?
I think I'm going to go with a 3.
Agreed. 3 for me as well. Yeah.
Solid. Good way to get out. Good way to get in. Yeah, I guess it's contrived at the beginning to an extent, but oh well.
Yeah.
It's not bothering me that much.
No, it doesn't. It doesn't bother me. It held my attention the entire episode. It was a good 3. It's just, it did feel like it's an awful lot of work for one episode to get through. They got through it better than I would have expected going in. If you had told me that 4 plot lines have to resolve themselves in this one and then kick off a new one, it's the Enterprise is going to botch this. They didn't really do that. It was fine. And I am excited to see this show have some kind of narrative spine to it, because its biggest failing to this point has been that it is a second-rate Star Trek series that is not doing anything new with itself. It's just repeating versions of older Star Trek episodes that were better, and it's giving us watered down versions of those episodes, and it's just not doing it for me to this point.
Yeah, the only thing I'm worried about is that it's going to completely lose that element of they're the first ones out there doing stuff, which is very possible. But I think holding your attention, as you said, is probably the highest. Isn't that really the highest echelon of rating you could give? Like, you should do, like, instead of numbers, you should say how many family members you ignored while watching it. Yeah. So if it's like a 3 out of 4, it's a great episode.
Just like, I mean, I'm sure there's a phone check counter. I should track that stuff, and it would all add together. But yeah, that's your
star rating is your phone. You didn't check your phone as one. Then you've got your 3 kids and your wife. If it makes you ignore all of those, it was
it's an all-timer. And also, we didn't say it, but we won't see Admiral Forrest for a very long time either, because he obviously won't be around in The Expanse. So goodbye, Admiral Forrest. Goodbye, Future Man. Goodbye, Silic, I would have to assume, although I don't know. Maybe he'll show up, but that would be kind of silly. Anyway, we're moving into the Delphic Expanse. We're pushing through the purple clouds. We'll be there next week with our first episode of this. Well, maybe we'll do the wrap-up. Maybe 2 weeks. Don't hold me to anything. We'll see. Guys, thank you very much for listening. Patreon.com/ThePensky File if you want to support us there. Clay, do you have anything you want to
say? We just finished, like, as I said before, the second Friday the 13th movie on our coverage of that on Patreon, and I believe this week is a new Rotten Horror Picture Show. We're off on Badass, so I've kind of lost track of things. But
it came out yesterday. Your Rotten Horror, your new Rotten Horror came out yesterday because this is on Thursday.
Oh, okay, yes. So this week we have A Dark Song for Rotten Horror Picture Show, which is our next wild card choice. It's a creepy Irish movie about casting a spell and how intense the consequences of that can be.
I'm sure we made the joke before, but the trying to talk in real time about when podcasts come out as you're recording for the future is the Mr. Show sketch about the pre-recorded live call-in show. Yes. If anyone hasn't seen that, they should watch. It's a sketch that's almost too intelligent to be funny, but it is very funny, where a guy is hosting a pre-recorded call-in show, which really doesn't need much of an explanation. Thank you very much. Thank you for listening, guys. Check out the latest Rotten Horror Picture Show. Came out yesterday. PenskyFile.com. Otherwise, see you around on YouTube. Thanks very much for listening. We'll see you later.